I strike the rim of this crusty orange-red skillet with a small wooden mallet. Instead of a dead thud, the iron gives off a clear, high-pitched ring that vibrates through the handle and hangs in the air like a church bell. That sound is the first thing I listen for in my brother's workshop, where the scent of pine resin and beeswax is currently fighting the sharp metallic tang of decades of neglect. This pan looks like a ruin, but that sustain tells me the heart of the metal is still whole and free of hidden cracks. I drag a metal file across the cooking surface, and beneath a paper-thin layer of flaky scale, a streak of bright, silver-gray metal shines back at me. This is the proof that a barn find is worth the 3 days of work. You will learn how to rescue these pieces using the 50-50 acetic acid bath and slow-fire lard seasoning. It is a process of patience that dissolves rust without the need for aggressive grinding or wire wheels that leave permanent scars. By the time we are finished, this skillet will have a polymerized carbon barrier smoother and more non-stick than any modern pre-seasoned coating. We must be precise, however, because there is a narrow window of danger where the acid stops eating the rust and starts pitting the healthy iron. This isn't a cure for every old pan. If your iron sounds like a dull piece of wood when struck, or if the bottom has warped from a century of uneven heat, no amount of vinegar will restore its utility. But for a structurally sound tool, it is a transformation I first witnessed in my mother Sarah's summer kitchen back in 1952. She saved a kettle that had sat under a leaking barn roof, using little more than a tub of sour water and a piece of burlap to find the silver metal hidden beneath the orange. I remember a Tuesday in the summer of 1952 when a neighbor brought over a kettle that had sat under a leak in his barn roof for a decade. It looked more like a piece of crumbling red clay than a cooking vessel. My mother Sarah didn't flinch at the sight. She filled a wooden tub with a mixture of vinegar and well water, then set the kettle inside. Every time the clock in the kitchen chimed the hour, she would step outside with a scrap of rough burlap to scrub at the softening scale. She explained that the vinegar bites the rust but leaves the iron alone, provided you don't let it bite for too long. By the time the cows were brought in for evening milking, that kettle was the color of a winter sky, ready for the fire. There is sound science behind what Sarah knew by habit. Common white vinegar contains about 5% acetic acid. When you submerge rusted iron in this diluted bath, the acid reacts with the iron oxide and converts it into a salt that dissolves into the water. This is a method recognized even by the foundrymen at Lodge as the safest way to strip a pan without the risk of warping it with extreme heat. However, the window of success is narrow. Once the acid has no more rust to eat, it begins to consume the healthy iron. This is why we never leave a pan in the solution for more than 30 minutes at a stretch. Abraham is careful to wipe his hands on a clean, lint-free flour sack before he handles the iron. He knows that the salts and oils from a person's skin can cause instant rust spots on the bare metal once it comes out of the bath. We are looking for the white iron, that silver-gray state where the surface is perfectly clean but hasn't yet started to pit. If you see tiny pinpricks forming in the metal, the acid has already begun its damage. While that iron feels as solid as a stone under your palm, it is actually a landscape of tiny hills and valleys. At a microscopic level, iron is porous, and understanding this is the key to a finish that never sticks. When we apply heat to the bare metal, those pores expand. When we rub in a thin skin of lard and raise the temperature even further, we are triggering a change called polymerization. This turns the liquid animal fat into a hard glass-like carbon shield that is physically bonded to the iron. It is a protective layer that keeps moisture out and lets food slide freely across the surface. This method is a gift for those who find a thick, vintage pan like a Wagner or a Griswold. Before the mid-50s, these were often stone ground at the factory, leaving them with a finish as smooth as a lake at dawn. However, do not try this on modern, thin, stamped steel pans or chrome-plated cast iron. The acid is too hungry for thin metal, and the seasoning simply won't bite into a chrome surface. You would end up with a ruined pan or a peeling mess that no amount of heat can fix. There is a hidden danger you must look for in old barn finds. Abraham and I have seen many a skillet used in the workshop for melting lead to make fishing sinkers or bullets. If you see a dull, silvery residue that doesn't scrub away like rust, or if the history of the pan is a mystery, you must use a lead testing kit from the hardware store. It only takes a moment to be sure, and it is a precaution you cannot skip if the pan is meant for the kitchen table. To start, you will need a plastic tub, never metal, as the vinegar will react with the container while it works on the pan. Gather enough plain white vinegar to cover the iron completely when mixed with an equal amount of water. You will also need a stiff, bristled brush, but avoid the wire ones that leave deep gouges. For the seasoning, find pure rendered lard with no salt added. Finally, keep a box of baking soda nearby. It serves a specific purpose in stopping the acid's work the moment the pan leaves the bath. Abraham starts by clearing the loose dust and the bits of straw that have stuck to the old grease. He uses a stiff brush and plain water, avoiding soap for now, just to see the true extent of the damage. Once the surface is down to the orange scale, he prepares the bath in a large plastic bin. He pours the white vinegar and the water into the tub in equal measures, exactly 1 gallon of one for every gallon of the other. The pan must be submerged completely. If the handle or a portion of the rim sticks out, it will be left with a different texture and color than the rest, so he makes sure the liquid covers the highest point of the iron by at least an inch. Now begins the watch. We don't walk away for the afternoon or leave the pan to sit overnight. Abraham sets his pocket watch on the bench and checks the iron every 30 minutes. He lifts it out, scrubs it under a stream of cool water with his brush, and watches the orange sludge wash away. The water in the tub will turn a murky, dark brown, smelling sharply of old rust and vinegar. For light staining, 1 or 2 soaks might do. For this heavy scale, he might go through 4 or 5 cycles of soaking and scrubbing. You are looking for the moment the orange is gone and the entire pan is a uniform, dull silver gray. If you see that color, stop the soak. Every minute past that point is a minute the acid spends eating the good iron. As soon as the pan is stripped to that gray metal, you have a race against the air. Bare iron can start to turn orange with flash rust before you've even dried it off. To stop the acid from continuing its work, Abraham dunks the pan into a second tub filled with a gallon of fresh water and 2 tablespoons of baking soda. You will see a bit of fizzing as the soda neutralizes the vinegar. After a thorough rinse, he wipes it down with a clean towel and puts it straight into a warm oven at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. He leaves it there for 15 minutes. This isn't for seasoning yet. It is to make sure every bit of moisture is driven out of those tiny pores in the metal. While the pan is still warm but safe to handle, he brings it back to the bench. This is where many folks make their biggest mistake by being too generous. Abraham takes a small dab of lard, no more than a teaspoon, and rubs it over every inch of the warm iron. He covers the inside, the outside, the rim, and the handle. Then he takes a fresh, dry cloth and tries to rub all that lard back off. You want to wipe it until the pan looks like it doesn't have any oil on it at all. If the pan looks wet or greasy, the seasoning will come out splotchy and sticky. You only want a film that is a few molecules thick, trapped in the grain of the metal. He places the skillet upside down on the middle rack of the oven. Putting it upside down ensures that if there is any tiny bit of excess oil, it won't pool in the bottom and turn into a gummy mess. He sets the heat to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. If you are doing this in your kitchen, you'll want the windows open, as the lard will begin to smoke as it reaches its turning point and begins to harden. Let it bake for 1 full hour at that temperature. When the hour is up, he doesn't open the door. He turns the heat off and lets the pan cool slowly inside the closed oven until it's room temperature. When Abraham pulls it out the first time, the pan isn't black yet. It usually looks like a dark, smoky bronze. He repeats that entire process, the thin coat of lard, the wiping off, and the hour of high heat, 2 more times. It is the 3 thin layers, rather than 1 thick one, that build a finish tough enough to stand up to a metal spatula. By the 3rd round, the iron has turned a deep, matte charcoal. It is a slow way to work, but as Abraham says, you can't rush a bond that you expect to last for another 3 generations. Stay frugal, stay free. Most of the trouble I have seen folks run into with this method comes from a spirit of hurry. You might be tempted to reach for a wire wheel on a power drill to speed through the heavy rust, but that is a mistake you cannot undo. The steel bristles of a brush moving at high speed will cut tiny, swirling grooves into the soft iron. No matter how many layers of lard you apply later, those scars will remain, and your food will catch on them forever. This work is a test of patience, not horsepower. If you do not have the time to let the vinegar do the labor, it is better to leave the pan on the shelf until you have a quiet afternoon. Another hazard is the fire itself. If you decide to season your pan over a big outdoor fire rather than in an oven, you must be careful not to let the metal get too hot. Iron changes its nature if it reaches what we call red scale, which happens around 800 degrees. Once the metal is heat damaged that way, it turns a permanent powdery pinkish red and will never hold a seasoning again. It becomes brittle and dangerous to use. Keep your heat steady at that 450-degree mark, and never, under any circumstance, pour cold water onto a pan that is still hot from the seasoning. The metal will scream and crack right across the middle from the thermal shock, and then the only place for it is the scrap pile. You should also mind the air in your house. When that lard hits the smoking point, it releases a cloud of thick, white smoke. It is not a poison, but it will settle into your curtains and stay there for days if you do not have a good cross breeze. Do this on a day when you can leave the doors open. As for the vinegar bath, it is a mild acid, but it doesn't know the difference between a rusty pan and a scratch on your knuckle. If you have any nicks on your hands, you will feel the sting soon enough. Use a pair of thick rubber gloves and be mindful of your eyes when you are scrubbing. Also, if you aren't certain that pan was always used for food, use that lid test I mentioned earlier. No amount of seasoning can make a lead-contaminated pan safe for your family. Do not expect this pan to look like a piece of black glass when it comes out. A rescued skillet usually has character marks, tiny pits where the rust sat for 40 years. As long as those spots are clean and sealed tight with the lard, they won't hurt your cooking. If the surface feels sticky or tacky to the touch, you used too much fat and didn't wipe enough away. You will have to scrub it back down and try again. Finally, if you find a pan that is already warped so it wobbles, or if you see a hairline crack, do not try to cook with it. Such pieces are a fire hazard and belong on the wall as a decoration, not on the stove. To see if our labor has truly bonded that lard to the iron, Abraham sets the skillet over a medium flame on the workshop stove. He waits until a drop of water flicked onto the surface dances and vanishes in a sharp hiss. He drops in a single pat of butter, which foams and turns golden, and then he cracks a fresh egg into the center. We wait a full minute while the edges of the white crisp into a delicate lace. Then, with just a slight tilt of his wrist, that egg slides across the iron as if the metal were made of polished glass. It doesn't leave a single shred behind. That is proof that 50 cents worth of vinegar and a bit of lard have outperformed any factory coating you could buy today. There is a deep satisfaction in this kind of thrift. It takes me back to the summer of 1952, seeing Sarah pull that rescued kettle from the wood stove and knowing it would serve our family for another 40 years. It's a reminder that many things in this life aren't truly broken. They are just waiting for someone to have the patience to see what's hidden under the rust. When you hold a pan, you've saved yourself. You aren't just holding a kitchen tool. You're holding a piece of history that you have earned with your own hands. I would like to hear about the iron you have found. If you have pulled a skillet out of a dusty barn corner or found one at a yard sale, tell us if you found a maker's mark and how that first egg behaved. Your stories help the rest of us learn what is still out there worth saving. Next time, I will be sitting down with Abraham to talk about how he maintains his high-carbon steel wood-turning tools to keep them from ever seeing a drop of rust in the first place. Stay frugal, stay free.